Hello, folks. I hope everyone can hear me. Welcome to the first of our LinkedIn Lives that we'll be doing this year. And the first subject is Asda. For anyone who reads my material on LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., this will be of no surprise to you. I think there's a lot to discuss and break down from the two recent store visits we've completed. Um, and I think there's some interesting observations that we can all have a look at and discuss. I'm hopeful the private chat or the chat will work for questions, but as it's our first go on this stream, I'm really unsure. So you're able to use the email address at the bottom to send any questions in, and hopefully we'll be able to get to some at the end. I think it'll be between half an hour, 45 minutes for this sort of next section. But hopefully we'll try to stay within time, and I'm hopeful that technology will not let us down, and we'll be able to share the recording of this for anyone else who's interested. So yeah, I think for Asda, obviously we know their challenges recently. Retailers at -6 on Kantar generally doesn't last, or that generally doesn't last too long as a low. But I think certainly Asda have been there for longer than we'd expect, and indeed they'd probably like to be. I think the appointment of Alan Layton is an incredibly good move, given that the challenges that have come for Asda over the last few years. To get some of that ilk in is fantastic. And I think certainly the recent appointments to the business show that there are people with belief in his plan and himself. So I think the only way is up for Asda now, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they navigate their challenges. Obviously, before, when Alan was there with Archie Norman and co, they were a PLC. And obviously that's a different kettle of fish to run a Drew supermarket like that, certainly in those days as well, with the lack of discounters. Obviously being private equity owned now, we've seen the challenges are very different when you've got 250 million pounds worth of interest payments a year, just to service the debt before you get started and anything else. So yeah, I think whilst the market conditions are very, very different, retailing's still the same. The fabric of supermarket retailing is still the same, despite online and the rest of it that's come along since the 90s. So yeah, listen, let's get to it, and let's go through the deck, and we'll share some of our observations from two recent store visits. And just to say really that these stores are they were completely picked at random. There's nothing, no forewarning, nothing like that. We're not going to name the stores. We don't name stores. And we just observed and visited as we do with every visit, really. We just sort of turned up and had a walk around. My wife did some shopping as it was, and I just had a walk around the aisles, which is nothing different to what I've done for 10 plus years now. So, yeah, I think there's some interesting bits and pieces here. I will try to find the suitable medium so you can see me talking away. Okay, so first things first from me. We come in peace. Whilst we do agitate for better for retail, we're certainly not, against Asda or indeed against any retailer. We think that, the retail itself can be better. I think we all agree that when we go shopping, and Asda's a key part of this mission or hope, if you will, for the UK consumer. And the UK market, I think, needs a good Asda. It needs a challenger brand, and I think that's where Asda is most at home. Not everything is the fault of the store, so there are numerous reasons why things look the way they do in stores, and especially in a retail struggling for growth. So whilst it's easy to go and pick a store apart with pictures, we don't aim to do that. I think anyone can go in and take pictures of empty shelves. I don't think that's what it's about. I think that a retail struggling for sales growth, generally the labour budgets have been attacked because it's the biggest cost base. So we don't draw any meaningful conclusions on the state of these two shops versus another 10 you could do in a week. So, that's somewhere that you could find this anywhere in retail. I think within Asda it's probably more pronounced. But interestingly, these visits were done on a Monday morning, which, is not common for retail people to visit stores on a Monday. But I think that's one of the best times to go. I think Friday at 5, you sort of expecting to see things maybe, or a Friday or whatever. But I think Monday morning, if the store isn't right on a Monday morning, you're onto a hide into nothing for the rest of the week. So that was sort of a specific time I picked. Yeah, just briefly about us. We advise numerous retailers on a global basis, and our work is centered on store visits and always has been. So we're able to capitalize on the trend of camera phones way back when, and that sort of propelled us through. And as I've said, one store is one store too many if we see something amiss or not right. But I think the important thing with the role that we play is that it's important not to draw a conclusion from one store and assume it's everywhere. It's probably in 50 stores if you see it in one, I think, but generally, you have to build a picture over a number of months and use other sources of data to support your findings. But some of the stuff we'll share today, anyone with eyes almost, I think, will look at this and think, yeah, that's not quite right. So we've still got the write-up to do on this. The weekly newsletters turn to a monthly newsletter, but how we'd look to turn the business around if we were turning it around would be this sort of simple framework, if you will, value being the biggest component of this for Asda, as we know, with their EDLP approach, and indeed as part of a full sort of model of full line grocers, they're certainly the most price focused, or were. Availability is the top metric or the top thing we look at. I think without availability, you can't go anywhere. And I think we've seen a number of tech initiatives come through that promise to help availability through camera technology and other things. Still very much the jury's out. I think good availability is hard to do well because you end up incurring waste sometimes if you get it wrong on fresh, and you can't hope to send in sort of one of everything in ambient and say you've driven availability because you've also driven excess stock, which is unhelpful from an efficiency perspective. The brand itself and own brand together are the next element we'll think about. And as the Asda brand on as a standalone is very powerful with rollback, Asda price, and all the good stuff that we know. It's very rare for a brand to have, something within the nation's rhetoric like Asda price is. M&S does with not just any. So that's quite a powerful thing. And own brand as well is a very important part of Asda's mix, especially when they look at competing with discounters. So we will look at those two elements together, and then colleagues third, because I think colleagues obviously are centric to any turnaround. But what we sense with store visits recently is that the colleagues are still friendly, but in the old days, you would get friendly service from Asda regardless, and it was always very much in the industry. Everyone would look at Asda and wonder how they did that with, level pay as everyone else and the same sort of benefits. But it was very much within the Walmart stroke Asda mentality and way of working that the colleagues were good and stores were well run. I think certainly in the last couple of years that's been lost a little bit. The endless restructures, certainly the hours budget being attacked because of sales not being there, has certainly had its impact on the colleagues and managers, who probably will find themselves in some, on some days having to sort of defy gravity because of the workload and the people they've got, and obviously the store not being in a good place sort of day to day quickly gains momentum in the wrong way, almost like a snowball going down a hill, and it's hard to then pull that store around without extra resource. And obviously, if stores are in a bad place, you can't get the volume because the availability is not there and the service. And it's a tale as old as time. We've seen it many times in retail now where costs are cut, but stores are expected to do the same, and it never works. And we saw that with Tesco 2014. We've seen it with JS in the past. And as to an extent now are in that position, but they are starting to invest again, which will help. This is a very, very simplified virtuous cycle of retail. There's a lot more underneath this that will define the elements we've put in here. However, essentially retailing in food is around moving volume. And if you can move greater volumes, that means your buying price can be lowered, which means you pass on some of the savings to the customer. And then your virtuous circle, or your flywheel, as Amazon would say, gains momentum in a positive sense. And obviously there's a lot of work then around aligning space with sales, so you're not filling up 3 times a day and the rest of it. But broadly, this is what a good retailer will do. And obviously then suppliers want to be part of a volume growth story because it means they can fill the factories, which is B&M and Home Bargains and discounters have been very popular with branded suppliers in recent years. But that broadly is how retailers want to operate. And volume is key here because obviously if the greater volumes or the greater buying price you can command, the size of Tesco, for example, means you can leverage a lot more. But it all goes back to availability on shelf, because the customer cannot buy it if it's not on shelf. And similarly for online customers, they're hostage to the store availability as well. However, this is another oversimplified doom loop. So you can see here that where the volumes start to fall for a number of reasons, the availability generally worsens, the store's labour budgets are attacked, the offer becomes more competitive, and then the momentum that we enjoyed in the former slide starts to go backwards. A big subject that we'll cover in a future live is around retail income and commercial income and retail media, which is very much a trend at the moment, and I think some retailers are using it to prop up or to fill the gap quarter to quarter, and other retailers are using it, such as Tesco, perhaps in the right way, as eyeballs on a piece of media at the point of purchase. It's very powerful, but we have seen, the takeovers in inverted commas of aisles that don't serve the customer. The customer doesn't want to see that, but there's marketing departments are very happy about that. And you would say some retailers are becoming real estate companies who happen to sell food and are just selling space for the brands, and it's guaranteed income, so it drives the innovation lower. People want to take fewer risks if you're a trader, because ultimately, if you've got guaranteed retail media income, why would you want to push a new product in or innovative deals and promotions? And especially when it's a low risk environment, if things are tough, retail media will win. And we've seen that in Asda throughout last year. It's become a gallery for brands, not really talking to customers. Obviously, we've got cost price inflation at the minute as well, so retailers will obviously push back. And we remember Tesco pushing back with Mars and Unilever back in the day, and Asda will have tried to do that, but obviously without the firepower of the volumes, it's then a difficult conversation. Asda don't want to pass on, or other retailers don't want to pass on the costing increases to customers, because it's important to be competitive. But where the retailer is receiving a significant media spend through all the signage, a supplier could say, well, we won't spend that on media, we'll give you that in price, which then creates another problem. So the retailer, if it's in a doom loop, then starts to struggle. Prices will rise slightly, range goes up, as we've seen, and retail media becomes even more important. And it's not retail media's fault here, it's the usage of retail media. And it was commercial income 10 years ago with Tesco. And then the costs are under pressure, which means store labour budgets are cut. And we've seen that time and again in retail. And it's amusing. It's not amusing, but it's sort of ironic, really, that retailers continue to do this, even though we know the end result is always the same. No one's managed to land all of these things, cost cuts and grow volume. It's never happened. And eventually we just run out of steam, which is where, as they're out the mid now, significantly reshaping themselves for the future. Like I say, both those things were grossly oversimplified. However, the general mantra, the general view is correct. So as I've said, looking back, it's not the first time we've seen this. You'll remember Tesco in 2014. We were very clear on Tesco, probably one of the first ones to call it back in the day, that they were starting to struggle. You could see signage like the stuff on the right, just simply selling space. And obviously range count on the left there, almost one of every type of dishwasher tablets for every occasion. No good for customers. No good for people filling up in stores, but the company would obviously add the range to either drive the sales, slotting fees for listing it, or indeed trying to drive their margins up as buyers by putting more high-priced products in. So we have seen it before. You'll remember, the clearance areas of doom on the left, again, symptomatic of no hours, and also a business that doesn't want to invest in clearing products through, because obviously it's protecting the cash. And then also examples of more signage there, a baking event, which is fine, but we don't need all the logos on the right. And more of these signs pop up around the store. I mean, it's very cluttered and very hard for customers to see. There's a couple of examples from about 5,000 I could have shared with you here from Asda. Here's two, one in the aisle for Felix. The brand carries itself in the aisle. We probably don't need everything else. And in isolation, that's probably okay. But when you look in the aisle, there's about 6 examples of this with different brands. And I think it's just a juggernaut that keeps moving with all these, and no one ever rationalizes, wow, we've got 20 million messages in confectionery, we need to thin them out. So because it's marketing or it's a different team who are just selling that space, they're almost in isolation to everyone else, which is why direction is needed at the top to not get addicted to this cash. And then ends are very important, even in a HFSS world where we don't see confectionery and other unhealthy products on the ends anymore. The central aisle is still very important for value messaging. Here, it's an Andrex end, which isn't great anyway because there's a £9 product there, which is just not great. And then you've got an £8 dishwasher tablets at top, which makes even less sense. But that space will be sold by the office, and the store will have to comply with that. So it's almost a bad plan that stores are having to land, which then, again, worsens morale. So 2 examples there from many we could have selected. So if we look at October 24 as an example, and we could have spent a whole deck going through Asda last year, but it wouldn't really be beneficial. But we do see, some of these sort of things for a couple of years now. If you look here on the left, Asda obviously is a GM and clothing business as well. So, there's significant profit in GM and clothing and a lot less profit in food. When a business struggles, such as Asda, with lower footfall and also sales falling, what you can see obviously is the knock-on effect into clothing and GM here. So a significant sale was noted in September, October last year. Despite the British summer being what it was, it pointed to us to the fact that sales had been slower in these areas, and then the markdown cost is significant. So there's a definite. It's not just the food business that suffers; everywhere in the business is suffering. But the food business sorts itself out, then everything else should be okay because the footfall will return. So there's definitely definitely an impetus in the business, I think, and a greater focus on food to get the other areas of the business moving as well. And then they all sort of work together. If you look on the right here, you can see there's a significant number of messages, although not as many as there could be, which is other pictures. But you can see the cash pot for schools was landed. There's cages on the ends here, special offers, price drop. It's George Home as well. So a number of different messages on the end there. But broadly, no clear messages, and also the cages of cardboard are not unfamiliar in sites in Asda anymore, unfortunately. And here's a good example of the central aisle the other way. So you can see you've got Asda Rewards, the loyalty scheme, you've got shippers all down the back aisle. You've got some sponsored messaging, and same on the right, you've got Joe Wicks, and you've got a number of different sponsored messages and shippers all the way down the middle. So quite cluttered as a shopper. And I think, again, looking back at Tesco back in the day and other retailers who've struggled, the retailers that do well have 1 or 2 very clear and concise messages. And when you walk in, you can see them overhead or at the shelf edge, and sort of you can remember them as you walk away. And it cuts through. In a retailer that's struggling, that's trying to find leverage anywhere it can to get sales moving, there's a significant number of bullets that are fired, so to speak. And then it's sort of, we're trying to get things moving, doing several different things, but that just adds to the overload in stores. So as you walk away as a customer, it's almost amnesia. You can't remember what you've seen because there was that much. And many customers don't look overhead anyway. So yeah, very noisy, and you can sense that there's no one single message of value there, which for Asda price and Asda as a retailer actually is really, really concerning. But I guess it's probably a measure of how far or how much the retailer's strayed from its roots, really, and it did what it was famous for. Again, we've seen as commercial money starts and retail media starts to grow arms and legs, you can only sell so many floor stickers. So it's then about which other areas can we use. So even in aisle, we saw some coming soon signage, and indeed in aisle signage, in bay signage as well, just sold to the highest bidder almost. Mega events were used to drive trade on GM and food. Again, these are good deals, but we're not really proving anything to anyone by selling things. So, giving away £10 for £5, you're not really proving anything. And on a one-off basis, it's okay. But if it's becoming part of an ongoing trade plan, you do start to run out of steam with it. There's only so many products you can feature, but also it is gimmicky and makes your comparatives the year after and sales harder to hit, because you've got to do the sort of similar activity or better the year after, which is why sort of everyday low price is favoured. So there were some examples of mega events over a weekend, which is always a concern to me around general trade. And on the right side there, 2 for £9 in magazines. I know the magazines are expensive, especially as a father to children who do spend sort of £5 or £6 on magazines and never look at them again. But 2 for £9, and as there's a high price to be flagging in magazines, and also the signage isn't particularly clear out which lines are featured, but it does. So again, it's another example of where the business is straying away from its roots and what it's famous for. Some customers, £9 might be, a third of their shopping budget for the week, for example. So Asda specifically, but all retailers, but Asda needs to be quite careful about what they feature on key signage and key areas in stores, because the customer's likely to infer if the price featured due to retail media is wrong or too high, and it's only featured because the supplier is paying big money for it. That could skew a customer's price perception of 20,000 other products. So it's a very, very careful balance, especially with Asda as they are, and indeed their heritage. And again, 3 for £24, expensive promotion. I know it's big pack pop, but whether that needs to be featured as it is entirely questionable. Obviously, they managed to sell some space behind it as well, so that obviously works. Another example of an expensive end with Felix. You've got £1.80 at the top, which is okay, and then we've got £26 at the bottom for the massive sacks of dog food that probably weren't needed on that end. And then on the left, a shipper of quite possibly one of the most troubling shippers I've seen in terms of mixed products and messages, from £1.30, but everything's around. There's some products at £10. So again, from a clarity message around price, very, very hard to follow, and almost up and down. Almost it could be a different company in each aisle. So again, this is a consistency piece and an example of where Asda have gone out of control, really. Buy 6 save 25% on wines was a deal that was active across the market last year. Asda were no strangers to that, but it's another gimmicky deal, if you will, alongside other gimmicky deals, not really proving anything. Another high price shipper there on dishwasher tablets. That will be cited by the supplier, indeed paid for, but it probably isn't the right answer for Asda, especially when you look at B&M and Home Bargains are incredibly strong in household alongside discounters who frequently carry brands. Probably not the right answer. And an expensive shipper on branded healthcare as well. Again, it's the message. It's speaking to customers, that price message. And if you look at the shippers versus the shelves, often the shippers are full, untouched, and the shelves are empty of the price of the products that are lower price or better value. So again, some examples of where the business is communicating the wrong sort of pricing to customers. So we fast forward to January 25. So yeah, it was last Monday, a couple of shops I did. Like I said, just completely at random, could be anyone, could be anywhere. But I thought there was some interesting points. Obviously, we've seen rollback. We tweeted that last week. I think we saw examples of that. Now, here's the central aisle, which you'll agree is markedly different to what we've seen previously. In other areas, we've seen very different, central prices. Central aisle comms, the brands everywhere and whatnot. That is now what Asda appear to be using, which is price drop as it was at the time, plus sort of very simple end-based messaging around special offers, price drop. But all the clutter cleared away, and it looked like limited to the aisle rather than being, dotted across the shop. Helium, I think for a year has been out of stock in every Asda the team and I have visited. I've got numerous examples of it. I don't know what the helium is, but that's a good example of where the business is stuttering. That's sort of easy money really with the helium, but they haven't had any. Price drop on paint, again, potentially advertising high prices here, but it was a DIY end, which was more focused than some of the supplier-led ones we've seen. And clearly issues in party as lines have not landed on time. But broadly, an interesting, again, helium's an interesting one to sort of, the business should have that and offer. If it's offering that service, it should have the helium. And what else is the customer going to buy? As it is there, you're probably driving them elsewhere. What was interesting to me was price drop lines across the shop were out of stock. Everything else wasn't, which is a challenge for the business, obviously, to get the wider range pricing correct, so there's effective substitution. But with price drop and indeed rollback, lines that are out of stock generally were promoted. So there's definitely a challenge there for the business to get the supply right, but also the space on the shelf right as customers trade in. And this was just in homeware. And again, on nappies, obviously stores that are online, the online shoppers are going to blitz the store before the shop even opens. But you could see, Pampers were £6. I think they were half price. trade was straight into those lines and nothing else. So it's very challenging when you do drop the price like that, because customers will just default to the lines that are on offer. And if they're not in stock when the customer comes in, they're doubly impacted because they maybe made a special trip and then they deem that the business is expensive on the lines that aren't, that are remaining and not on deal. So definitely a focus going forward. As the rewards, the loyalty scheme, yeah, it's challenging. I think as the customers want cash, they want the saving at the time. They don't necessarily want a cash pot per se. I think 10% on babies that's a decent sort of way to use loyalty for as the customers. But I don't think taking money off, or sorry, adding money to a cash pot rather than giving the customer a discount at the time of purchase is correct. I think as the customers want lower prices there and then maybe that's the challenge for us, is to get the loyalty scheme working harder across other categories, almost in the background. That feels like the right way to approach rewards. And then you see again, a lot of range density in baby. Some of these categories probably do need thinning out a little bit. They're quite hard to shop. There's a lot of choice, and a number of price points moving around as well. If we look at Little Angels, it's a great example of where the Aldi Little price match has gone and has been disbanded by Asda, because it's cheaper on those two examples to buy the two of the 6-pack to get a 12-pack at £6.98 than it is to buy the 12-pack at £7. So Asda essentially defeats itself, but that's driven by the Aldi Little price match on the 6-pack wipes. So disbanding that scheme is the correct thing for Asda, because it allows them greater flexibility. Obviously, they've got a greater range than Aldi, so they can then thread pricing through and offer a discount on the larger pack. But as it is there, that's an example where it doesn't work and causes confusion in aisle, which we'll see as we travel around. Again, 348, 11.96 is a very old school Asda deal on Easter, so that's another sign of maybe where we're going to go with the irregular price point endings. No more 0 and 5 endings, or indeed round pounds seemingly. And again, some of the additional space on health and beauty being improved with lower prices. Again, 10 quid's still hefty, I think, but some of the better than half prices in Colgate, AOL were certainly stronger than what we've seen previously. And especially in household, and I think pet household and health and beauty, there's a lot of supplier money there. So there will have been suppliers spending great amounts on signage and placement of product on ends, which is why we've probably seen the pictures we saw before. But the big brands event was strong enough. We saw the first signs of rollback there as well too, around a week ago, with complete with smiley face, which is good to see, and obviously customers appreciate that. Some more price drop, half prices on health and beauty as well here, and there's some more of the rollback. So again, it stands out well, and certainly customers are going to respond to that. Messaging is very familiar to them. I know they rested it a couple of years back, probably the right answer, but it certainly feels right that it's seemingly coming back, and it stood out really well in aisle. And again, here's another example of where we see the Aldi Little price match being a challenge. There's one source here that isn't on, or two sources aren't on price match, because there won't be an equivalent line in Aldi or Lidl. So Asda's pegged the whole prices at 69p, but again, it does look out of sync to have two lines that aren't on match. A customer could infer that they're not matching those, but are matching the others, when in reality, that's just because those lines are stocked. And then we get into a bit of a realm of where we, despite discounters, there's a confusion in aisle, where we have the largest pack here reduced from £4.50 to £4, and then there's a core line at £3.65. So obviously you get the larger pack there that's down to £4, causing a little bit of confusion potentially with the £3.65. But obviously the per 100 gram basis, the largest pack is still significantly better value. The challenge comes where the larger pack, not in this example, but another example, sells out, and then the customer's left with numerous choices, and then we'll be greatly disappointed when the value one is off sale. So it could be quite difficult where you've got a discount on one line, but you're carrying 3 or 4 sizes. The customer's almost got to have a maths degree to work out what the best value is. And if the offer's off sale, it's a double negative. And again, here you see there's some examples of Heinz ketchup on 2 for 4, I think it is. £3 each, which is good. But obviously that's the specific flavour, and the core size tomato ketchup wasn't included. You got Daddy's sauce beneath. It becomes quite messy. And it's an example of the range growth in Asda. They've done quite a good job pre-takeover of thinning ranges out and being quite focused on label and brands rather than it being everything. I think we can see here, as you look at some of the assortments, there is a great range. Range have been extended again, I think. Certainly looking at some of these examples, if we tracked it through, you've got two Hellmann's at £2.75, and you've got the £3 on a price drop, which is a good offer. But then bizarrely, you've got smaller size at £1.90, but then the mid size at £2. So again, there's barely a difference. Obviously, everyone's going to buy the £2 offer or the £2 variety, but then if that's off sale, you're only spending 10 pence less. But on the per 100 gram basis, it's more expensive. So yeah, the choice or depth of range here is is impacting Asda, and making it look certainly at shelf edge quite difficult to navigate the value. Luckily, all these lines are in stock. If the price drops were off sale, it would be quite frustrating for a customer, I think, looking at the value. So certainly outside of spreadsheet management, ranges have to be looked at in reality. But that will take time to filter through, of course. And then coffee, obviously hard hit by cost price inflation. But we can see here that, even the principles of starting with the lowest prices at the left and moving up to higher prices, sort of price river, if you will, they're not necessarily adhered to in Asda. You've got £2.45, then £22.25 on the bottom shelf, £6.60 for the refill, then into £4. And then you've also got offers moving around as well, and also a reward star product on 2 of the 3 law coffees. The other one may be included in rewards, but it hasn't got a tag. So yeah, there's a lot of density here on range as well. And on label isn't easy to see. It's sort of tucked in next to the brand at the bottom. £3.94 is another rounded price, which we thought was interesting. And then again, you've got a Heinz deal here that probably makes sense on paper at 3 for £3. But you then have other examples of where products are not on 3 for £3. They're on different deals, including a 5 for £5 with Heinz. So again, just from a customer perspective, quite difficult to navigate with the cross-category promotions, which Asda were famous for. And that's just an example, I think, of where the drift has been. But this will take time to filter through. 2p great value. I think that's a delisted line that for some reason remains on shelf. And then 3 for £12 on Tassimo drinks. At Christmas, I think it's probably appropriate, but £12 is expensive. It's an expensive promotion to access for customers. And whether that should be featured as it is, I think remains to be seen, really. And then again here, this is where the rollbacks impact the shelf edge. The rollback here is the better value line, obviously save £1. If that's off sale, it's 10 pence more for less, which is likely to frustrate a customer, and they will deem that as potentially, as they're offering poor value or worse. So again, it's the range density that's the challenge here. Does the retail need to carry the kilo and the 700 and whatever that is gram SKU and the smaller one? With rollback in mind, it's probably better to refine some of these, so there's greater space for the rollback, or indeed the line. I think this is where range density really hurts. And again, that inexplicable 10 pence difference on premium jam. Now, some of these prices could be incorrect, as in store error, but I think I've seen this in a couple of shops now. So I'm not sure that is actually correct. But again, I don't know how, how there's a 10 pence difference between 3 jams of the premium. If there is a cost price, to just level them off at 190, I would say. And then again here, so where we see our little price match on the core, 109, that's great. But they've also got a 99p essentials, a value tier essentials relaunch went really well. Obviously, the business deflates itself by pushing value tier. But there's a 10 pence difference there between mid-tier and value, which doesn't feel right. So it probably feels right to consolidate the volume into the mid-tier and maybe drop the price a little bit, or maybe even the value tier. But it doesn't feel right at the minute to have 2 types of peanut butter within 10 pence of each other. But these are all challenges to play through. The marmalade's the same. There's a 4 pence gap here. So again, there's definitely work to do here on what to do, if you will. But all these are examples that are live as you travel around the shop. And again, here's some examples of extra special, 220 and 250. And then the Hartleys is 150. Some are reduced to £1 a rollback, some are not, which again means the prices are moving incredibly. They're moving an incredible amount around, and it can be quite confusing. And then some availability issues on Ambrosia, where again promotions are rollback. The customers were straight into those areas, which meant availability issues, customer having to transfer into other products that are on offer here but may not be in other categories. So the rollback strategy, I think, is great, but the challenge is the cannibalization of, if those products sell out, what does the customer have as an alternative, and is there a discount there? If it's full price, then that's likely to agitate customers. It's a very difficult balance to sort of strike. I think there's a core rule for me. If you look at the second shelf on the right, 54 pence for own label. My sense with that is that own label should never be more expensive than a brand, even if it's on promo. So what you'd expect there would be Asda to drop those own labels to 49p on a rollback, which then means they're lower than the brand that's also on deal. So it underlines then, the own label's place. I think too often we see examples of where the own label hasn't dropped and therefore it's more expensive than a promotion, which should never happen. Where there's jelly, for example, it's all quite similar product. And then on the right, the clearance area was full in this store, really well merchandised, but a number of Christmas products were there, which seemingly hadn't been reduced, which I couldn't understand, because the best time to reduce that is pre-Christmas, to get rid of it. So another sign potentially the business hanging on to margin and not being able to clear lines through properly. And here we are again, further down, it was all damaged packaging. Again, another sign of the organisation being really cost conscious, but probably not making the right decision for the customer. And then 3 for 11 here on the Dolce Gusto, but the label said 3 for 10. I'm obscure in the SEL, but I'm pretty sure it says 3 for 10. So an expensive promo, but also a confusing one, because the SEL, I don't think the shelf edge label is wrong. It's probably the board is wrong, which again undermines price integrity a little bit. A good end on the left with the cereal. I thought the own label cereal was quite well executed, and more ends should be given to own label, really, to underline, in the customer's mind, that's where the value can be found as well, and it's perfectly transferable between that and brand. On the pet end, some of the prices I felt were a bit high, £7.50. Never really sure about that. £4 appropriate, I think, on pedigree. And then the home care aisle on the right was a bit of a dog's dinner, pardon the pun. The bottom 3 shelves were okay, but then it sort of lost its way further up, with products same product in 2 locations and prices everywhere. So I wasn't sure if that was a local decision by the store that they made the wrong call, or if it was a central end. If it was a central end, I'm probably more worried, as in if it was planned like that. And then again, £14.50. I mean, it's not a great discount anyway, but I don't think that amount, the product for that amount, that price should be on an end in Asda. I don't think that's the right message. I think that should be an aisle only deal because of the high unit price. And again, if you look at Felix, they're all at a £5. It's probably going to go to £4.97 or something similar, I think, to round it and make it feel less expensive in inverted commas. But then you've got big packs at 15 as well, So again, they're better value for customers on the longer term if you're buying, bulk, if you will. But the unit price can still scream to customers it's expensive. So care has to be taken in the aisle itself, within the bay, where the customer looks, to make sure that the prices, that the value is easily found as well. Because you can undo all the work we've seen by having an end with £14, a product at £14.50. However good that price is on a per pouch basis. I think it's a very careful journey, especially what's gone on for 2 years before. I think obviously Tesco said they're cutting the bakeries today. Sainsbury's did the same last week, and on paper for the cost, I completely understand that. It's disappointing, of course. Scratch bakeries and whatnot are a part of the fabric of the UK, but clearly, with the advancement in frozen technology and bake-off, Scratch has lost a little bit of specialism. I think with Asda, they did it before the takeover. I don't think the quality has ever come through as well as maybe M&S, Lidl, or even Sainsbury's and Tesco still sort of have part Scratch, part not stores. I think particularly the rolls and everything we Asda were really strong in the old days with the freshness and ringing the bell when the bread was ready. I think Asda have lost a lot of that within bakery, and certainly the rolls, looking at them here, you could be forgiven they were just a standard pack of rolls that you'd spend 50, 60 pence on in the aisle. They just had different packaging. So I definitely think there's work to do on bakery itself, because it feels there's still a little bit of, still baking going on a bit, if it's frozen product. There's definitely work to do in the bakery itself to try bring it to life. And, the pancakes are still sold, for example, and made fresh, but there's not a great deal of communication about that at all. And as they were famous for those things in the old days. So definitely there's bits within the offer, aside from price, that the Asda should call out. And obviously then, on the right side, probably the most densely packed fixture of wraps I've ever seen in my life. Very difficult to shop, and obviously you can see they're difficult to fill. So I'll just put everything in. So work needs to be done on range rationalization, I think, or indeed space. If there's those wraps are all selling, probably needs another bay just to give it a greater presence. And obviously we know the challenges in the UK and the US and everywhere else with shoplifting and shrinkage. Each bottle in Asda here was in a net and was tagged, which obviously has an impact from a look and feel from a customer, but obviously it does reduce shoplifting. So as long as it doesn't impact the sales, it's sort of okay. But we've seen other retailers with the lockable cages, everything that are behind keys, sort of locked away, if you will, doesn't work. We saw Morrison's open a number of those at Christmas, and they've stayed open. So clearly the sales impact is greater than the fact we're not losing any through theft. Clearly the theft stops, but also clearly the sales stop as well. So there's definitely a halfway house to be found. But again, it's another example where retailers struggling will be over focusing on things like shrinkage and stock loss, which may impact availability conversely if the store isn't, or they're told not to do as many gap scans and other routines. I don't know that for fact. I don't, but from afar, that's what Tesco did in the old days, and indeed other retailers have done the similar in the past. Some more examples in household. Now, some of these products have changed online now, and they've gone to rollback, but we can see here that the business ends up having a 55 wash at 350 on a core price, and then for some reason dropping the 76 wash down to the same price, which then confuses things on a per litre basis. Why not drop the 55 wash down slightly as well? So there's a little bit of a difference even. Otherwise, because the per litre becomes an absolute minefield, particularly if that line's out of stock. The customer looks at both and sees the one. Yes, it's the same unit price, but the actual it's the same shelf price, but the unit price is higher. They feel like they're getting poor value. So it means that the price drop rollback availability is absolutely critical, because if it's off sale, if the other lines that are there to be had are not in line or close, the customer will infer they're getting ripped off. The customer will infer that they've been tempted in with these rollbacks that aren't on sale. So it's incredibly difficult to get the balance right, especially when customers are zoning in on rollback or price drop as it is here. But we can see here online where we took the picture, the smaller line had dropped to three quid, and the higher line was £5.50. But bizarrely, the small line appeared to be normally £5.50, which it is here. So the 55 wash and the 76 wash are both the same price. But now the larger pack is now £3.74, but the smaller pack is £5.50. I couldn't really understand. Look a few times at this. Household's a great one to look at when you look at this, because essentially the unit price is the highest pack size should be the lowest unit price, because obviously you buy a bigger pack, you get you get more for your money, so to speak. And then the smallest one should be the highest unit price. And you sort of go, yes, it's £3, but you're only getting X per wash or whatever. Households all over the place with promotions in Asda and Morrison's, but in Asda specifically, it's really hard work. So it's one to look at. And again, whether rationalization needs to happen here, because we've got prices at you've got Comfort all at the same price there, which is great. But obviously, again, if the bigger pack blows out, the customer's going to be upset paying £3 for, X less laundry liquid. And Unstoppables here, 50p between the two pack sizes. No promotion. Couldn't understand that at all. And I don't know if that's a lack of store visits or commercial direction, or it looks okay on the spreadsheet. I really don't know, but I don't think anyone's looked at the shelf, and it was screaming out here there's clearly an issue. And no consistency, I'd say. Smallest pack here at £3 on price drop, and then 6.50 for the 25 pack. But bizarrely, the 25 pack of the other flavour was 50 reduced by 50p, but the core one wasn't, which was slightly confusing because then the big pack was £8. So that was 24p per pod, if you will. And then you go to one that's 23p with the price drop for the smallest one, which means the smallest pack size actually becomes the smallest unit product, the smallest pack size on the shelf, the 13 watt, becomes the best value. So from a price hierarchy viewpoint, a mess. And I think it's a bit of looking at the whole end-to-end as in household and the strategy, but also the range density is too much. There's too many pack sizes in between, which could lead to the reasonable conclusion that the supplier's been obviously driving this with the buyer and put more in. It just makes it much significantly harder work to navigate as a customer, as a colleague, as a manager, as a anything really. So definitely work to do here. And on the right side there, look, every single toilet duck known to man in one fixture with Harpic as well. Not necessary. And again, it becomes harder work when you're filling it, merchandising it, shopping it. Some gaps in pet food as well were already notable, even though the 1450 one that I said very expensive had sold out in one variety. And the 345 one beneath, again on deal, 3 gaps there. So already starting to see gaps opening up on price drop lines, which makes it doubly difficult. And again, in the powders, the planogram could have been incorrect here, but I don't think it was. But you had XL family packs and then core. You had 2 types of aerial next to each other. It felt really messy. Again, own label lost at the bottom as well. So what I think Asda should do is potentially bring own label like Tesco did to eye level. Leave it where it is at eye level. Don't have to invest anything necessarily. But the customer, then when it's scanning the fixture, can see the own label there at eye level, £5, £8, and they'll draw a sense of security from those prices and then look in and around at the deals. But as it was at eye level, you're looking at £6, £9.50, £12.50 at the top. And then having to get a calculator out to work out, price per whatever. And then, I think this is the same product, but 2 different pack sizes. But double the price. So a brilliant example of where the lowest is the £5 pack is lower unit price than, each on an each basis, on a tablet basis, than the bigger pack, which is completely backwards. A great example here of an Asda customer. So Regina 2-pack, save 125, 275 off sale. That's what the customer wants. Could have been on the top stock at the top there. And then the left-hand side, £7 absorb on Asda Rewards untouched. So again, that's a challenge. That space needs to be greater for the 275 one. Ideally, shrink the £7 one down a little bit more space and supply for the price drop. Another area that suppliers are dominant. It just so much product there. Decent issue availability, but so much product in an area that, does it need all that really? Probably not, because the customer will just buy the promotion anyway, most likely, or on label that's tucked away at the bottom. And then to the second shop, which, was slightly busier, slightly more challenged and compromised, I'd say. A good example on left of where sales have gone. This would have been cream cakes back in the day. Now purely ambient product from the bakery. So retailers who struggle will do defensive merchandise. So they will take chilled product out, put signage in, or they will fill a fridge with wines so they don't have to send chilled product in. That's okay in a store that's, suffering competitiveness. If the business is struggling itself, this becomes a zero-sum game, and there's never enough ambient product to go in the chilled space. So a sign of the times, I think. I'm interested to see this store had made its own signage, which I've seen in a few Asdas. I couldn't really understand why. But certainly from a central office viewpoint, they'd like a little bit of control there. Another great example of online. This was an online store, so the online shoppers had been round. That there is just about on sale, but all that product directly above it was for that gap. So, 11 a.m. in the morning, certainly needed to be more, so needed more on the money there with the fill. I see a number of, as they would call them, comps, cages with reduced product on. It looks a mess like it does here. The reduction area was full, which is why this is here. But again, the business, because the sales are quite slow moving, generally, or slower moving than they were, if it's a real bad product, like some of these are, like limited editions, that they're just chucking in, there's nowhere for them to go when they need to sell them through. So they get they go on this like sort of graveyard. So there was a number of crisp lines and drinks and things like from Halloween there. It just didn't look great. And then again, more homemade signage, which I just couldn't understand. Because the worst thing with that is it looks like they put the price up and they've had to hurriedly make the signage. Now that might not even be true, but the customer would or could infer that. Some more uneven prices here. Yeah, unsure why there's 20 pence gap. And then here as well, on the extra special, one of the lines is £2. One's, I think, either the price match or price drop, and then the other one's a 165. But one's 165 with a price drop or a rollback, but one's £2. So again, the merchandising doesn't help. The bleach on the right, I'm not sure. Guess the price, or the price at the bottom, but there was no large price to back up the deal or the price point. And then, yeah, the big retail centre turning the labels over is always bad news. And they've done it here. This was, yeah, really early on. So a concern as to whether online have bought all that, the online shoppers, and there's ways to fill it up, but it wasn't great. And they still had Christmas tubs to trade through. That's not a unique Asda problem. A lot of stores have still got those, which I think is indicative of the customers pulling back and seeing the poor value. But yeah, not great Monday at 11 a.m. at all here. And Christmas lines are still being cleared through on core space, which worried me, because the reset should have happened. So that's all the bin bags. So clearly, Christmas and clearance feels like a theme. It needs just to sort of take the hit and get rid of that stock. And there's another example here of an incredibly range dense air care fixture, which is just, there's such a lot there. And here, again, price points. £5 to £4.50, and again, the £4.50 deal will be on the left, and you got £12. I mean, you got £15 on a price drop, and £6.50. So there's a lot of product range here. Should all this be in Asda in every store, or should it be, selected ones? Is there a way to do specialty or large packs in one bay? Because you got £15 at eye level, which is a lot, and obviously that's a deal, so it's probably higher than that normally. So again, from a customer comms or walk around perspective, the customer's seeing a lot of high prices they walk around. And I mean, yeah, pet, I mean, it's just horrendous. Look at all the product there. And Christmas clip strips in the middle as a bonus. But yeah, just such a lot. So difficult for the shops to maintain that, by the way. Very hard. Because obviously there's so much product in there. Filling it's very difficult. There's a lot of similar products. And I think, whoever's in the traders here, for whatever reason, they've just continually added to the range. And we're left with that, which is not helpful to anyone. Specifically on label. If you're trying to call on label out to the bottom shelf on the right side there, lost entirely. So again, £4 nappies are off sale here. The £4 ones above are just about on sale, and one's off sale. So you can see immediately in nappies, the trade's dropped into the low price, understandably so. If those are out of stock when the customer comes in, worst case, specifically for this stuff, they're faced with higher prices elsewhere, which will probably may see them cross the road to a discounter. That's the only challenge with big promotions like that, is having the supply and the availability. And we can see here again, not particularly strong. They're decent deals on health and beauty, but they were all blitzed as well. And then another end, this stuff, it's always difficult in GM with all this, because you've got to clear it, and it's quite seasonal. But yeah, I don't think this is the answer. I don't really know what the answer is, but cages of this isn't the answer. And it feels like a mess, and they'll eventually count it out as a store. They'll forget they've got it, or they won't apply further reductions. So I think there's a trend here for clearance that needs to be addressed. And it may be a cost to the business, but I think it needs to be taken. And it's not going to get any better, by itself. And then just finally on de-icer, in the north, it was slightly cold, which is always cold, but a week or so ago, slightly cold. So de-icer was in 2 locations in this shop. One in the clearance areas had no label, didn't know the price. The second one, as you walked in, also that no price again. So, whilst it's, the market's tough and sales are hard, at the time you could have really sold de-icer. The business wasn't helping itself by not pricing either of them in that store. So yeah, that's 50